Republicans are planning to counter-program the Democratic convention this week. President Trump will campaign in key battleground states, while Joe Biden and top Democrats make the case against his re-election. Joining us now from Trump campaign headquarters in Virginia is senior advisor Steve Cortez. Steve, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning.
Does the Trump campaign, does President Trump acknowledge that Kamala Harris is eligible to be the next vice president of the United States?
Yes, he made this very clear in his press conference yesterday. He said this is not an issue that we're going to be pursuing.
On the other hand, he didn't strike down the claim, and I'm asking you about that because he once again yesterday was offered the opportunity to dismiss the false claim that because her parents were immigrants rather, that she is not eligible to run even though she was born in the state of California. Here is the president this week on that subject.
I heard it today that she doesn't meet the requirements. And by the way, the lawyer that wrote that piece is a very highly qualified, very talented lawyer. I have no idea if that's right. I would have assumed the Democrats would have checked that out before she gets chosen to run for vice president.
Isn't this just like the birther claims that the president made against Barack Obama? Nothing could be easier than to say it's a false claim, she is eligible, not to say, well, I'm not going to make an issue of it. Why not just say it's wrong, it's false?
Chris, yesterday, he made it, again, very clear in his press conference yesterday because there were questions after his press conference on Friday. By the way, the president is giving a press conference almost every day, in stark contrast to Joe Biden, who continues to hide in his basement and is not available to the press. But on this issue of Kamala Harris, he made it very clear yesterday. He said, I'm quoting, he said, this is not something we will be pursuing. He never brought this up. The campaign never brought it up. Members of the media have asked him about it, are trying to create a controversy that simply doesn't exist.
I'm just going to press it one more time. You can accuse me of being one of those media people. Why not say it's wrong? She is eligible. It's one thing to say I'm not going to pursue it. It's a different thing to say it's flat wrong. She's eligible to be the vice president. Why doesn't he say that?
Look, again, I don't know why it's incumbent upon him to opine on legal scholarship of the Constitution and the 14th Amendment, for example. I don't think that's his place as president. What he is saying is we have not made an issue of this. We will not make an issue of this. It's a non-starter from our point of view, for the president and for the campaign.
Let's talk about a different issue. Your real problem with Kamala Harris, which is that you say she's too far to the left. You heard me discuss that with Governor Murphy, but I want to put up some other aspects of her voting record. She walked back support for Medicare for All to include private insurers as part of the plan. As California Attorney General, she supported the death penalty. And as Attorney General, she resisted interceding in police officer shootings of citizens. Steve, none of that is far left.
Look, I would say this about Kamala Harris when we look at her record. She seems to be an opportunist and to do whatever is most expedient at the moment for political power. But here is the reality of the Kamala Harris of 2020, the candidate right now for vice president of the United States. In the previous segment, you mentioned some of her extreme far-left radical views, things like banning fracking. But there are more than the things you listed. For example, she believes in decriminalizing crossing our border illegally. Those who would trespass into our country will no longer be sanctioned by rule of law. She is in favor of confiscating the most popular rifle in America, mandatory confiscation. This is, and I know you mentioned the GovTrack data, so it's not just my opinion. That is a data-driven model that says for the year 2019, she was the most liberal member of the United States Senate, even to the left of Bernie Sanders. Her nomination, in our view, completes the complete radical takeover of the 2020 Democratic Party. The Democratic Party today is not your parents' or your grandparents' Democratic Party. It does not represent the interests of blue-collar workers in this country, and it doesn't represent the interests of people who have traditional values in this country.
All right, let's switch to the other big subject that's being talked about right now, which is mail-in voting. Democrats argue that President Trump opposes mail-in voting and is making it harder for the Postal Service to deal with this surge of mail because he thinks it would hurt his re-election. Here's the president this week.
Two of the items are the post office and the 3.5 billion for mail-in voting. Now, if we don't make a deal, that means they don't get the money. That means they can't have universal mail-in voting. They just can't have it.
Steve, isn't that a classic example of voter suppression?
No, it is not, and I'll tell you why. First of all, these are two different issues. There's nothing ambiguous about where the president, where the campaign stands on universal vote by mail. We are firmly against it. We believe in absentee voting. We believe in early voting. What we do not believe in is blanketing a city or a state with every single person who is listed on the voter rolls, because we know that the voter rolls are not accurate. And again, that's not just my opinion. The data shows us that. For example, in Clark County in Las Vegas, according to a story from the Las Vegas Journal-Review, we know that 17% of all ballots that were sent out, these are live ballots, these aren't applications, 17% of them, over 200,000, were returned as undeliverable, because we're a mobile society. People move, people die. The voter rolls are not accurate, so we're against universal vote by mail as a principle. Now, regarding the Postal Service, that is a separate issue. The Postal Service needs systemic reform. It has lost $78 billion since 2007.
Let me interrupt you, Steve, and I haven't up till now, because that isn't what the president said. In his interview with Maria Bartiromo, I just want to quote what we just heard. If they don't get the money, that means they can't have universal mail-in voting. I understand issues with the Postal Service, but he is specifically saying he's linking the money to the Postal Service for universal mail-in voting. And that raises this question, because the Postal Service, because of its money problems, has just made a bunch of changes. They have eliminated overtime. They have taken hundreds of mail sorting machines out of operation at a time when you're going to have a new crush of mail from mail-in voting. And it isn't just mail-in voting, Steve, because it's also, as Governor Murphy said, people aren't getting their Social Security checks. People aren't getting their drugs in the mail. But isn't the president, at a time when the mail is more important than ever for an election, why not make it easier for people to vote, not harder?
Well, here's the answer, Chris. He is willing to, because that's not all he said on Friday about the postal system. He also said in his press conference, and again, he continues to make himself available on a near constant basis to the media, the exact opposite of what the Biden campaign and Joe himself are doing. He also said in his press conference then on Friday, when questioned about this, he said he would be willing. He has already offered $10 billion of additional aid to the postal system if the Democrats will come to the table and make a deal. He was asked, would he go all the way up to the $25 billion that the Democrats want? And he said yes, if they come back to the table with the tax cuts that the president wants for American workers and the relief he wants for those who are jobless and still looking. So, I mean, that answers your question. He said yes, he is willing to make that deal. But
well,
I think this is important.
Let me ask this.
It doesn't matter. But Chris, it doesn't matter how much money the post office gets.
But Democrats are saying, you know what, maybe we won't do it as part of the bill. We'll just do a bill to bail out the post office because it's so important that people be able to vote mail-in,
Chris,
between now and November. Would the president support that as a separate package?
There is no amount of money that could get the United States Postal Service ready for universal vote by mail. And the reason I know that, don't take my word for it, listen to the state of Washington's Secretary of State. Those who are in favor of this universal vote by mail often point to the state of Washington as the symbol, as the example of what we should be doing nationwide. The Secretary of State of the state of Washington says it takes 5 to 10 years to build the capacity to suitably do it. They're now advocating to try to do this in 5 to 10 weeks. That won't work.
Okay. One final question. You'll want to answer this one. Traditionally, when one party holds its convention, the other party and the nominee for the other party goes dark. That is not what President Trump is going to do this week. Put this map up on the screen. He's going to barnstorm the country this week, traveling to 4 potential swing states. Question, why is the president doing it, and why does he think that he's going to be able to break through when there's all of this media focus on the Democratic convention, as there will be on the Republicans next week?
Right. Chris, listen, this entire week, starting today, starting this morning, we are really flooding the zone, taking our message to the American people. We're all over the Sunday shows, both the campaign folks as well as the president himself, while Joe Biden and all of his surrogates have chosen to ignore the Sunday shows on the eve of their convention. And I have no doubt, by the way, when we see their convention, that it's going to be quite a show. I really call it the Wizard of Oz convention because there will be a lot of Hollywood glitz and showmanship. But if you look behind the curtain, there's a feeble and corrupt man behind there. What the president's going to do, in contrast, is go to places like Wisconsin, the place that Joe Biden is snubbing, take our message to the American people and act like a commander-in-chief, somebody who just solidified a historic pact internationally, somebody who is growing jobs back and industrial production back domestically. He's going to go to the border in Arizona on Tuesday and show that we are serious about locking America's front door.
Steve, I promise you I'm going to break in. Thank you. Thanks for your time this weekend. And next weekend, I promise we'll be previewing the GOP convention. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.